Değerli konuklar ve konuşmacılarımız, sevgili iklimdaşlar, hoş geldiniz. Şarm El Şeyh'te toplanacak olan COP27'nin hemen öncesinde bir kez daha bir aradayız, birlikteyiz. İklimce düşünecek, iklimce konuşacak ve umut ediyoruz ki hep birlikte iklimce hareket edeceğiz. Son 3 iklim sohbet boyunca küresel iklim eyleminin uzun ince bir yolunu aslında aldık, adımladık. COP26'da tüm dünyayı saran iklim kriziyle mücadele için birlikte hareket etme çağrısını sesimize ses kattık. Stockholm artı 50'de herkesin refahı için sağlıklı bir gezegen hedefi için yol aldık ve dedik ki bu bizim için bir sorumluluk. Değişmemiz için bir şansımız ve hala bir fırsatımız var dedik. Ve şimdi bugün COP27'ye doğru ilerlerken insanlığa yaptığımız çağrı aynı. Sahada işe yarayacak bir şekilde kapsayıcı, bütüncül ve gereken kapsamda acilen harekete geçmek. Acilen harekete geçin diyoruz. Geçtiğimiz yüzyılın önemli bir kısmı ne yapmamız gerektiğini ve nasıl eyleme geçeceğimizi konuşarak geçti biliyorsunuz. Yol haritamız belli artık. Konuşmamız gerektiği kadar konuştuk. Harekete geçmemizin elzem olduğu kesin. Peki neden hala eylemin bir adım önünde hala duraksıyoruz? Bu oturuma hazırlık yaparken sevgili Mısırlı iklimdaşlarımızın bir deyişine rastladım. Çok kapsamlı, çok katmanlı ve zor sorunları tarif etmek için toz toprak öksürmek diye tarif ediyorlar. Yani bu metaforu kullanıyorlar. Toz toprak öksürmek. O kadar doğru ki bizler için tüm insanlık ne kadar servet biriktirmiş olursak olalım an itibariyle hep birlikte toz toprak öksürüyoruz. Nefesimiz tıkalı. Gezegen çapındaki bu krizle yüz yüzeyken insani gelişmenin daha önce görülmemiş bu boyutta kayıplar yaşadığı belirsiz bir döneme doğru da adım atıyoruz. Tedirginiz ve geleceğimizin bu tedirginliğin içinde belirlemeye çalışıyoruz. Belki de bu kriz anını en iyi tarif eden iki şehrin hikayesinin girişiydi. Zamanların en iyisiydi, zamanların en kötüsüydü. Hem akıl çağıydı, hem aptallık. Hem inanç devriydi, hem de kuşku. Aydınlık mevsimiydi, karanlık mevsimiydi. Hem her şeyimiz vardı, hem hiçbir şeyimiz yoktu. COP27 bizleri gezegenin kriziyle mücadele etmek için verilen küresel çabayı ortaklamaya çağırıyor. Stockholm artı 50, herkesin ortak refahını öne çıkartmıştı. UNDP bu belirsiz zamanları aşmak için açık ve kapsayıcı bir diyalog kurabilmemiz gerektiğini söylüyor. Kim, nerede, ne zaman söylemiş olursa olsun tüm mesajlar bir noktada toplanıyor. Ortaklaşa bir eylem. Ancak bu ortak adımlar sayesinde akıl çağını, birbirimize olan inancı, mevsimlerden aydınlık, zamanlardan iyi olanı kurabilir ve yola böyle devam edebiliriz. Şimdiden başlayalım mı? Bir filmimiz var, 2 dakika sürecek.
Most scientists agree that an increase of just 0.4 more degrees will drastically change the world.
And the world are dealing with record extreme heat.
Storms have been causing deadly floods.
You could have mass melting of ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica.
If we don't act immediately, scientists say the consequences will be catastrophic.
3 degrees of warming is really disastrous.
Dealing with unprecedented heat waves and drought.
All day today, the rain falling so heavily and so quickly.
$10 billion. But recovery funds are tight.
Rescuers doing everything they can to reach survivors.
Time. What if we could buy ourselves time? What if we could go back in time, undo what we've done, and start over? I say what if, because that is simply impossible. As the world moves forward at an unprecedented pace, we need to find ways to keep up with change and with time. For the past 4.5 billion years, planet Earth has been thriving, growing, and constantly evolving. And while we've only been around for thousands of years, some of what we've done is irreparable. Now, our planet needs our help, and we're running out of time. In today's rapidly warming world, the climate crisis won't wait for anyone. That's where you come in. You, the decision makers, the game changers, the forward thinkers, the first responders, you who make things happen and get things moving. You can help give the Earth a fighting chance. And the time to do so is right now. there's no extra time.
This is your chance to step up.
To turn pledges to action and put our future back on the right track.
Evet, sevgilerim, ilk önce çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Bizi böyle şahane bir ortamda ağırladığınız için. Çok teşekkürler. Hep beraber burada bizi buluşturduğunuz için bu vesileyle. Mısır'ın COP27 başkanlık vizyonu müzakereleri uygulamaya geçişi önceliyor. COP27 sahada işe yarayacak şekilde kapsayıcı, bütüncül ve gereken kapsamda acilen eylem çağrısında bulunuyor. Bu çerçeveden baktığımızda bu çağrıya nasıl yanıt vermeliyiz?
Working. Can you hear me? Yes, you can. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, ambassadors and colleagues. It gives me great pleasure to host you at the Egyptian residence for this timely pre-COP event, which is organized in collaboration with the Embassy of the United Kingdom in Ankara, the UNDP office in Turkey, and with the distinguished presence of Turkish officials. Allow me to start by quoting what the UN Secretary General said recently to the BBC on climate change, and I quote, "There has been a tendency to put climate change on the back burner. If we are not able to reverse the present trend, we will be doomed." Doomed is what he said, unquote. Unfortunately, in our opinion, in the Egyptian opinion, the goal of limiting global heating to 1.5% is more fragile than ever. The agreement won at COP27 in Glasgow last year has been overshadowed by global events since. Therefore, the circumstances surrounding COP27 are quite challenging. Yet we have to remain hopeful and focused and try to isolate and insulate the negotiation process from these external circumstances. We have to strive to achieve concrete outcomes in Sharm el-Sheikh. As COP27 presidency, we strongly believe that if countries are to backtrack or deviate from their commitments and their efforts to maintain the agreements and understandings made in Paris and Glasgow to limit the global temperature increases to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, we will be on track to have over 2 degrees Celsius of global warming and maybe up to 3.6 degrees according to science available. Please have a look at the assessment displayed or that will be displayed in front of you on the screens here. These are scary statistics, unfortunately. According to the last report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, the data here shows what will happen to Earth if the temperature starts growing up by 1.5 degrees and further. We are currently, for your information, 1.1 degrees now. And we're 1.1 and we're getting lots of disasters in Nigeria, in Pakistan and many other places, even in the US and many other places in the world. According to our experts, our negotiators, we have assessed where we are in relation to climate change and have observed the following elements. First, the world is behind on action, be it on adaptation or mitigation. On mitigation, the current levels of action and pledges will not safeguard the Paris Agreement temperature target of well below 2% or keeping the 1.5 degrees within reach. On adaptation, there persists a finance support gap that is exposing life infrastructure and ecosystems to acute climate risks, especially in developing countries where many people live in highly vulnerable areas to climate impacts. Developed countries are short of delivering on commitments and pledges to climate finance. Non-delivery of the annual 100 billion USD commitments is just the tip of the iceberg. We have learned recently, and this is a very good example, that Germany, and I know that the German ambassador is here, is well committed to the 100 billion commitment, and this is something that we really appreciate. It is worth, in this regard, it is worth noting that the Standing Committee on Finance under the UNFCCC estimated that developing countries need 5.6 trillion US dollars until 2030 to enable them to deliver on their nationally determined contributions, NDCs. Additional impacts due to the loss and damages, and this is a very important topic that will be discussed in Sharm el-Sheikh. The loss and damage resulting from the adverse impacts of climate change with Pakistan, Nigeria, and the US and other places, case in point, contribute to significant increase in the level of indebtedness, in particular of developing countries. Obviously in Africa is a very important place. We're facing lots of challenges. And in this regard, I'd like to highlight that our continent is spending, the African continent, is spending 2 to 4% of GDP to cover the cost of the adaptation measures, and that since 1961, crop productivity growth in Africa shrunk by a third due to climate change. These are scary statistics, unfortunately, but they are facts that we have to all take into consideration when we go to Sharm el-Sheikh. In our opinion, in the Presidency's opinions, we should, in Sharm el-Sheikh, focus on implementation, where we can demonstrate success stories that can be replicated and scaled up, discuss challenges facing the transition to low carbon, climate resilient pathway, identify measures for an equitable and just transition, and finally strengthen the resolve to keep the 1.5 degree target within reach. We will try in Sharm el-Sheikh as presidency, to the best of our ability, to lead a thorough and comprehensive discussion between developing and developing countries, developed and developing countries, to try to bridge the gap in different positions and rebuild trust between North and South, so that the world can rise to overcome climate change. Thank you, Mert.
Thank you. Sevgili Marian, COP26'nın iddialı bir hedefi vardı. Tüm dünyayı iklim değişikliğiyle mücadelede birleştirmek. COP27'ye doğru ilerlerken ne olduğunu düşünüyorsunuz? Yani aslında COP27'de neler olacak?
Thank you very much. It's great to be here today, and we're absolutely delighted to be handing over the baton to our Egyptian colleagues. And thank you, Mert, for your very powerful introduction. Yes, at COP26 in Glasgow last year, over 200 countries came together to sign the Glasgow Climate Pact, keeping alive the ambition of limiting the rise of global temperatures to 1.5 degrees. Such a crucial target, ensuring humanity does not face the most disastrous effects of climate change. And you saw the threats that we're facing already on the screen before you. Yet since the gavel came down on that historic COP26, the world continues to drastically change. As we enter what will be a very difficult winter with major pressures on global energy security driven by Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, and as governments respond to soaring inflation, rising debt, food insecurity, and cost of living challenges, the fundamental issues of climate change must remain a top priority for us all. The latest IPCC science is unequivocal that we cannot delay. The chronic threat of climate change is turning more acute, and it's impacting every country across the globe. From the devastating floods in Pakistan, record heat waves in Europe, and famine-inducing droughts in Africa, the list goes on. This is why the current global crisis response should increase and should harden our resolve to deliver what we committed to in the Glasgow Climate Pact. After COP26, we were able to say with credibility that we'd kept the pulse of 1.5 alive. But this pulse will remain weak until the Glasgow Climate Pact moves from words on a page to tangible actions and progress. Implementation now is key. we need to ensure that COP26 marked a turning point for global climate action. Every country must now revisit and strengthen their climate change targets to align with the Paris temperature goal as necessary this year, not at some vague point in the future, but this year, in 2022, with net zero commitments and 2030 emissions reduction targets underpinned with clear delivery plans. As climate security has become synonymous with energy and national security, climate targets are no longer a nice to have, but they must protect our citizens, our economies, and our environments. We must also protect climate vulnerable countries by making sure that our commitments on adaptation and loss and damage are honoured. They must drive really practical action on the ground. Now, we're seeing some promising progress on adaptation finance and work on the global goal on adaptation. But loss and damage will need to use the new Glasgow Dialogue and development of the Santiago Network to really scale up progress and support. Now, none of this will be possible without mobilising climate finance. And the UK continues to work with countries and international financial institutions and private financial institutions to meet the commitments they've made and help secure greater access to critical finance. And we're increasing public-private partnerships to support climate action and drive ambition in emerging economies. And we're using country-led just energy transition partnerships that put fairness at the heart of the transition from coal to clean energy too. So the UK presidency continues to be as ambitious as possible to ensure that we keep 1.5 alive and work with all parties and stakeholders to accelerate more ambitious climate action ahead of COP27 in Egypt. We will continue to drive delivery of the Glasgow commitments at COP27 and beyond, including with long-term initiatives such as the Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership and pioneering new country-led just energy transition partnerships too. Thank you.
Thank you. Sevgili Louisa, UNDP 2022 İnsani Gelişme Raporu'nda insandan kaynaklı iklim değişikliğini dünya genelinde tedirginlik ve huzursuzluk yaratan yeni bir belirsizlik bileşkeni, katkıda bulunan en büyük faktörlerden biri olarak tanımlıyor. Peki bilim ne diyor? Yani gezegenimizin çok mu fazla zorladık? Yoksa COP27'nin anlamlı çözümler üretmek ihtimali var mı?
Thanks very much, Mert, and let me echo you and my colleague in thanking Mr. Ambassador for hosting this event and for excellencies and other distinguished guests for coming in such large numbers to participate. I think it shows the degree to which interest is combined with this anxiety that we have documented in the UNDP Human Development Report for 2022. And as a staff member of UNDP and the wider UN, it's kind of my job to be an optimist and to find a reason for idealism and a pathway to progress in everything. But I have to say, as a private citizen then, also, it is, I think, harder and harder to find that grounds for optimism on climate change and also on the whole complex of crises that are confronting the world today, that we see sometimes divert our attention from the climate crisis, which I think is the central crisis, but then we see so many other crises, and this again is the theme of the UNDP Human Development Report, that we face this complex of uncertainty because there are so many crises that we can't really stop for a moment and focus on the root causes of any one of them. But I will echo my colleagues very much in saying that, you know, we're experiencing the climate catastrophe now. We're not awaiting it. We are in it. We are deeply in it, and often physically in it, in the form of floods, in the form of forest fires. And I think this is a reality that not everyone in the world has grasped. That this is not some future threat. This is very much the explanation for so many of the climate-driven disasters, but other crises we see worldwide. And until we accept it as that this is the reality of today, we will have a harder time agreeing on the solutions. And we see it everywhere. You know, my colleagues have both mentioned Pakistan, but just some of the numbers from Pakistan, that 33 million people were displaced, are displaced. is 15% of the population, which is just, I think, inconceivable, as is this idea of 1/3 of the country being underwater, 1 million livestock killed, $30 billion at least in damages. So, and this is one crisis, but one can see how easily a flood crisis is then translated into a conflict, famine, other crises that, again, in the themes of our Human Development Report of 2022, make it that much harder to come up with real remedies. And I think just some indications of how deeply we are already in the climate crisis, that already species and people are on the move because of climate everywhere. So there are some numbers about, climate migration. Will we have climate refugees? Already we have lots of people moving, perhaps not in the drama of a refugee crisis, but slowly, slowly. And one study, just to give an idea of how this will happen, one study projects that, European cities will in fact be a climate that should be 600 miles further south in the future, but the climate will be changing by 12 miles every year. So gradually, London will be becoming Barcelona with all the consequences that have. So some places will perhaps enjoy a different climate, other places will suffer from a climate, but everything will change. And we see already the movement of species in particular, but also people. But my second point is really that more broadly than just climate change, humanity has disrupted the rules of nature. So we know that there's a lot of unpredictability in the world, uncertainty. We have natural disasters. But up to this point in human history, natural disasters have come with certain rules. So we have experiencing things that we can call a 10-year flood, a 100-year flood, a 1,000-year flood, and that, for example, insurance companies act on that basis, do their calculations. But now what we see is a total disruption of those established natural rules that we can have in one and the same place a 10-year flood, a 100-year flood, and a 1,000-year flood in 3 years. So nature's rules are out of whack, and we are guilty for pushing them in that way. And I think one of the things I find most poignant as an older person, getting older, is that we have lost so much. So we have lost, for example, summer and winter, the summer and winter of our childhoods. We will never have that again. I think a lot of people sort of think about it, okay, well, it's been weird for a while, no snow maybe, but that's just gone forever. So it is something that tends to, I think, promote paralysis rather than action, the sense that we have gone so far and lost so much. And I talk often about this idea of climate grief, that when we realize we have gone so far that we tend to go into a state of mourning for what we've lost and perhaps lose track of what we might do to make change. So, and I think one of the harsh realities we face is that even if we went to net zero tomorrow, it would take hundreds of years to get back to anything that could be called an equilibrium. So we really are in a very, very bad place. And I think there are lots of analogies, and our Secretary General, I think, has run out of analogies of emergency, but it's like a horror movie. And in horror movies, don't go into the basement. So for 50 years, we have been saying, don't go into that basement. You know what lurks there. But we have. Unfortunately, we've gone down the stairs, and now we have to deal with it. We are in the basement. Freddy Krueger is there with his horrible mask, and we need to figure out what to do. So then the question, as you say, is COP27 enough? Will it be enough? And I think the short answer is no. It can't possibly be enough for a crisis of this magnitude. But can it live up to its own promise? And I think here, our Secretary General is really working very, very hard to raise ambition, to raise awareness, and together we, as a UN team here in Turkey, are also on that same agenda, but everywhere else, that we see that the commitments to date for the NDCs, the nationally defined contributions, will get us to 2.8 degrees. So we had the idea, the commitment to 1.5 with that pulse just barely beating coming out of Glasgow. But where we are now is, the current state is 2.8. So a lot of motion has to take place. We do have, on the positive side, majority of the world's GDP committed to net zero. So lots and lots of countries have made strong commitments, including Turkey, 2053, 2050, to get there. But this is a question our Secretary General is asking all the time. Are these commitments credible? You know, essentially show me the money, how we get from your status of today to your net zero of 2050 or 2053. And there, I think that for now, the pledges are just not fully credible. So there needs to be more action on filling the space between the pledge and the reality. This is something where the UN system is very committed to helping in advice and support. And we see, after Glasgow, only 24 countries have submitted revised net NDCs. So the plea to come back after Glasgow and have a real push. So now is really the time to try to get all countries to raise their ambition, to raise their sights, to up the NDCs, but also to make those commitments in a credible way, according to a standard that everyone can agree to and is transparent, but also with the policies to match. So let's say we push through COP27 and we have a strong commitment, we keep the pulse alive, even if it's unlikely that we'll have the kind of dramatic tsunami of commitments that we need. Where can we look? Where can someone like me or you, I'm sure you're also anxious, and our Human Development Report for 2022 pointed to some very interesting findings showing that the world is in fact at a very high state of anxiety, that if you look at stress levels globally, surveys demonstrate that 6 out of 7 people are feeling a high state of anxiety, that there is a higher degree of sadness, and even there was a study of 125 years of all the world's literature doing these computer programs to found that there has been a dramatic peak in mentions of depression, anxiety, stress, and grief in literature worldwide. So it's not just me, it's not just you if you're also feeling stressed, but the world is in a high state of anxiety. So where can we look to find the hope for radical change? And here I would point to 3 things in wrapping up. One is, I think, you know, we tend too much in climate policies and climate appeals to direct our appeals to the abstract individual or the abstract, as we saw in the film, decision maker. This is valuable, but I think we need to face head on the economic interest behind climate change and focus on the fossil fuel industry, which we see will have profits of $4 trillion this year. So $4 trillion could go a long way to remedying a lot of the things we see. So that's one thing. Taxing the fossil fuel industry. Second is, I think we need a radical reimagining of what policies can work. And we've seen this, as our Human Development report points out, we've seen this in the COVID crisis. We saw the orthodoxy of fiscal restraint thrown out the window. Why can't that same approach, this radical departures from traditional economic policies, be applied to climate change? And third, and this is perhaps the most challenging, but perhaps the most promising as well, is the idea of solidarity between countries and solidarity between those countries that created climate change and those countries that are suffering the consequences. And in most cases, it's the worst consequences, as in the case of Pakistan, are experienced by countries that committed almost nothing to carbon emissions. So one way is through this idea of damage and loss, but more broadly, the idea of transforming the conflict that we see so many places and finding climate as a place for understanding between countries and coming up with the solutions there, a compact where we would see the support from the rich countries to those less fortunate countries in very clear economic terms, but also a global compact to ensure that we achieve the ambition we need to get out of this horror movie that I'm afraid we're really very much stuck in the basement that we shouldn't have entered in the first place. So there are also a lot of, I think, win-win solutions that I will save for later in the discussion, but there are ways, and I think this is an area where UNDP and the rest of the UN system are very keen to help, of of finding ways forward where we have win-win-win. We invest, but we gain also from shifting from fossil fuels to renewables and to things like energy efficiency. So thanks. And thanks for everybody for coming, and I hope we can together translate our anxiety into bold action.
Çok çok teşekkür ediyoruz Luisa. Yani gerçekten tutkuyu yükseltmek ve mücadele heyecanını taze tutmak dönemindeyiz. Çünkü bir önceki iklimce sohbetlerimize de sık sık dile getirdiğimiz gibi ben mesleğim gereği de böyle bir alıntı yapmak istiyorum Shakespeare'den yine. Charles Dickens'tan aldık. Shakespeare'in de hatırı kalmasın. Yani bu to be or not to be, olmak ya da olmamak döneminin tam da içindeyiz. Tam da bir olmak ya da olmamak döneminin mücadelesini veriyoruz. Ve maalesef bunu çokça örnekleriyle de görüyoruz. Gerçekçi ve net hedeflerle birlikte ilerleme zamanı. Şimdi sevgili Emir, Şehir Şahit'te uygulama zirvesinde yani bunu özel kılan ne olacak aslında?
Thank you so much, Mert. I just, before I answer the question, I just want to highlight the importance of the lessons that we have learned from the UK and what they have shared with us. We've learned from their experience presidency a lot. And I just want to highlight also something very important that were brought by a major developed country, the UK. The importance that you have highlighted, and I really thank you for that, on the issue of finance and loss of damages. The UK echoing that, UK Charge Day in Turkey highlighting that, I think is very, very important, and it's something that we can build on in Sharm el-Sheikh to try to move forward and make progress, and hopefully that we can pass the flag that, like you did to us, pass the flag to our brothers from UAE next year. Hopefully we'll try to make their job easier. It's not going to be easy, but we will do our best to try to achieve something, to hand over the flag to our brothers in UAE. Hopefully we will try to make their job easy. But to answer your question, I just want to underline that we have 35,000 people are expected to attend COP27, including more than 80 heads of states and governments, as well as representatives of environmental NGOs, youth organizations, businesses, investors, and others. Over 2,000 speakers will address the participants and talk about a variety of subjects. The Egyptian organization team has listed over 300 topics for discussion related to sustainable development and climate change, a number that underlines the complexity of these issues. The presidency is working on different levels. We have, first of all, on 7 and 8 November, a summit for heads of states and governments with an aim to discuss current challenges and keep climate change on top of the international agenda. In this regard, we are organizing 6 summit-level roundtables on just transition, future of energy, with focus on hydrogen, innovative finance for climate and development, climate change and food security, climate change and water security, climate change on sustainability of communities. In the negotiations, we are committed to work with all parties on mitigation, adaptation, finance, as well as loss and damages. Of course, this is something important for us. We have to find a compromise between different parties on this particular issue. Moreover, we're organizing for stakeholders 11 thematic days after the summit from 9 to 17 November that will provide an inclusive, meaningful and conducive environment for the private sector, academia, civil society and NGOs, youth and others to be at the heart of the discussion on how we can deliver pathways that are just and ambitious. Also, the COP27 presidency team has worked out a number of initiatives that will be launched during COP27 in different economic areas to ensure that implementation is happening on the ground, so as to link the efforts of the UN specialized agencies to the global work of combating climate change under UNFCCC to deal with the adverse effects of climate change. The initiatives take into consideration both adaptation and mitigation measures to ensure a balanced implementations. Countries are welcome to join these initiatives according to their national interests. Finally, I invite you, guests, to visit our COP27 website, cop27.eg, for more details about the conference and also to download the app that we have established in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Sevgili Marian, Birleşik Krallık iklim eylemi için Türkiye ile nasıl bir işbirliği geliştirdi? Yani Birleşik Krallığın COP başkanlığı görevi biterken bu işbirliği nasıl bir sürece doğru evrilecek?
Thank you very much. And I would like to emphasize what Louisa said on the importance of solidarity, collaboration and cooperation. I think this is a great question where we can show how we've partnered with our Turkish hosts here. So thank you very much for asking that. So I'm delighted to say that the UK has had a very close working relationship with Turkey during our COP presidency. In fact, the COP president, Alex Sharma, has visited Turkey twice in the last 2 years to meet his counterparts here at various ministries and at very senior level up in the presidency too, as well as to engage with business, civil society and youth climate activists, which was probably one of the most powerful elements as well. And we're really on the same page regarding the scale of action needed to meet these important global goals. And over the last year, Turkey has taken some major steps, as we know. They've ratified the Paris Agreement and announced their 2053 net zero commitment. And we hope, in fact, we've heard earlier today, that there will be some news shortly on an updated NDC as well, and a long-term strategy. So this will really help set the ambition for future years on climate change. And we have some excellent examples as well of the UK and Turkey working together on climate, which we want to build on in the years ahead. And one example which Your Excellency touched on is support through the financial system. So the UK is a global financial hub and a key player in green and sustainable finance, with world-leading expertise in insurance, investment banking, and capital markets, as well as consultancy and carbon markets. And with this expertise, the UK is keen to support Turkey's own efforts to mobilise the necessary finance to implement climate targets and build resilience. So last year, we hosted a UK-Turkey Green Finance Conference in London back in March, and over 200 participants from governments and private finance institutions came together to discuss collaboration and support to Turkey's own green finance sector. And we were able to showcase low-carbon innovative projects from our own Climate Finance Accelerator programme. And this project will continue running this year, and we're delighted to be supporting another 8 projects on this vein. And these projects cover a range of things from energy, transportation, AFOLU, which I'm told is agriculture, forestry and other land uses, as well as the waste sectors. And they'll receive a tailored one-to-one and group support to increase their chances of securing finance from Turkish and international investors. And as well as this, we're very proud to be partnering Turkey on clean energy growth as well. So our export credit agency, UKEF, Export Finance, last year announced its largest ever export finance guarantee for a solar project. And we're providing £217 million, which is about 290 million US dollars, as a guarantee for a new solar power facility in Carapina near Konya. And this will power 2 million Turkish homes. And the project is supporting the localization of supply chains with solar panels actually manufactured here in Turkey, in Ankara, in fact, so here in the capital. And we also have ongoing cooperation with some newer energy technologies too, like small modular reactors, as well as hydrogen and offshore wind. And also on the topic of clean infrastructure, UKEF recently announced their biggest ever sustainable civil infrastructure deal this March with a 2.1 billion euro loan to fund construction of a 503-kilometre high-speed electric railway between here and Izmir, down on the coast. So when complete, this new line will provide a faster, low-carbon alternative to the current air and road routes between the two cities and help fulfil Turkey's climate change commitments that were made at COP26 and be much easier for everyone to get to the coast. So moving forward, I think the UK and Turkish government have very good ambitions to expand our clean growth relationship further. And we're looking for opportunities across the whole economy, from electric vehicles to building and energy efficiency, from protecting biodiversity to clean and affordable energy for all. And we're ready to support Turkey on this journey to help meet its ambitious goals. Even though in a few weeks' time we will no longer be the COP president, we will have handed that baton over, our commitment to progressing climate action, both in Turkey and globally, remains strong. And we look forward to building on these strong relationships that we've made over the last few years and longer to ensure that we can help drive climate action as much as we can. And the green transformation is an opportunity as well. It's a way to boost economic growth, it's a way to create jobs, and it will be as much an imperative as for a prosperous future for all, as well as securing a clean future for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Sevgili Luiza, UNDP Türkiye'de ve dünyada, yani dünya genelinde iklim değişikliği ile ilgili küresel mücadeleyi güçlendirmek için neler yapıyor?
Thanks. I'd like to pick up where Marianne left off, because I think we see UNDP's role very much in taking what we know from science and what we know we need to do to show the how, and to show as often as we can that the how is not sort of spending huge amounts of money and going into poverty, but that there are real win-win solutions that give us a greener future, but also a more prosperous future, and wherever possible, a more equal and more inclusive future. So just to give a few examples, because UNDP does a lot globally, but also UNDP is very directly involved here in Turkey in supporting the government and the society as a whole on climate change and on all the issues related to climate, and let's say more broadly, trying to protect nature from the damage that humanity has done to it. So first, just most immediately, and I think very exciting for us, UNDP is supporting the government in preparing these new revised NDCs to be submitted any day now, ahead of COP27, in the hope that this will be the most ambitious plan possible. So obviously UNDP isn't making the decisions, but UNDP is helping to build the scenarios and coordinate all the actors, collect the data, so that decision-making can be as clear as possible. And again, we hope to nudge a bit in the direction of the greatest possible ambition, because it is so essential right now. But together with that contribution to the NDCs is a more long-term effort at preparing a strategy for 2050 on climate change and an action plan to 2030. And obviously this is very much a participatory effort that involves all stakeholders across the government, but also from all of society and all sectors, because we know with climate change it's not enough for the Environment Ministry to declare a policy. It needs to be coordinated across the government and have the support of all those actors at local level in civil society to be successful. And this is something I think is very much a partnership here, but also something we see in other countries where UNDP is active. Second point, so a lot of that is focused on mitigation, on reducing emissions, but also on adaptation, where UNDP locally and globally is committed to what we call nature-based solutions. So we've done enough sort of fighting. As our Secretary General says, we've been at war with nature. We need to work with nature. We need to see ourselves as subjects of rather than masters of nature. And here, just to give a couple of examples, the idea of restoring wetlands and floodplains as a natural source of flood response rather than building apartment buildings in floodplains, that with the restoration of a wetland, one can say, okay, we don't need to invest in a wastewater treatment plant. The wetland will do it for itself. That's a nature-based solution. But there are all sorts of innovative technologies and solutions around now. For example, when the old wisdom on flooding in urban areas was to get the water out of the city as quickly as possible, which often led to just pushing the flood down the river basin or to the next city. Now there are lots of technologies of building water storage or temporary water storage facilities under parking garages or in large spaces so cities can retain that water and use it when water is scarce for irrigation, for other purposes. So that's a second thing. Thirdly, UNDP has taken a big role in advocating an end to fossil fuel subsidies. So a huge amount of money is still spent worldwide by governments in subsidizing an industry that is really driving us to extinction. And here, UNDP last year had a huge campaign before COP26 of a giant dinosaur, animated dinosaur, speaking at the General Assembly saying, look, my excuse was a meteor. That's why I'm extinct. But you folks are making yourselves extinct by spending money on subsidies for fossil fuels. So it's a strong advocacy point, but also behind it comes policy support for governments to kind of extract the fossil fuel subsidies and translate them into spending on something much more worthwhile. And as I said, the villain of the piece today is really the fossil fuel industry, and it is not suffering at all from the current crisis, but instead extracting huge profits. So. Another point, and here I would speak to a couple of examples here in Turkey, working on these win-win solutions, just proving to people that investing in a green future means gains across the board rather than costs. And here I think energy efficiency is an obvious one, but also I wanted to point to a project where we have had a very direct role in bringing solar power to forest villages in Turkey. So this is about 10% of the population. And the idea is not just to bring renewable technology to villages that tend to be worse off than the rest of the country, but to create a financing model to make solar power affordable to the average home in a village. And I had the opportunity to visit about 9 villages around Konya that have benefited from this program. And it is such a transformation because you see people who have been worrying from day to day about their electricity bills now are paying nothing for electricity, but also have an income. For example, a community of 40 households getting $8,000 a year back from the grid is a big win-win, I think. And it's also a win in particular for women because of the electricity crisis, they've been told not to use the washing machine, not to use the water pump, and have been washing by hand and carrying buckets of water. So it is, in fact, a huge transformation and something that is very clearly, I think, a wave of the future. You see those who benefited from the program, about 1,500 households across Turkey, are now the envy of their village, and there's a huge list of other villagers who want to sign up now for the solar panels. So. And a third thing is on green jobs, where I'm glad to see Numan here from ILO, where UNDP and ILO together did a study. Say you invest all of your new funding that you would spend on fossil fuels in renewables, what is the impact on jobs? And the conclusion of the study was adding 300,000 new jobs to the economy, and I think adding 8% to GDP, yes. So a big win, and this is not any additional cost. This is simply what you would have spent on fossil fuels. So there's a lot at work there on this thinking to convince people that a green future is also a more prosperous future. Another point, the idea of a just transition, also something we share very much with ILO and our sister agencies in the UN system, that if we are going to phase out coal, which we have to, clearly this is a priority and is moving much more slowly than it should be. Coal is still the dominant source of electricity globally and is growing, not shrinking. But we need to show a way for those who work in coal mines, the whole coal value chain, that there are alternatives in renewable energy, but also in, for example, remediation of coal mines for use for other purposes. So there are lots of jobs there. There's no shortage. It's just we need the right policies to show the way to a just transition. And finally, and this is not a UNDP program, but one that I think resonates with what you were saying about solidarity, is the Secretary General has been promoting the idea of just energy transition partnerships, where, say, a cohort of friendly countries with resources partners with a country that has, for example, huge coal production needs, huge transition needs, and said, okay, let's work together to solve this problem. And South Africa was one of the beneficiaries last year, but I think our Secretary General is campaigning very hard to have as many of these as possible going into and coming out of COP27. So there's a lot of work being done, and this is something I think I can proudly feel optimistic about going forward, that if we think through the wins, we can really build a positive energy for those solutions and a greener future, a healthier future without coal as well, and one that can mitigate many of the consequences of the ongoing catastrophe we're seeing in the world. Thank you.
Çok teşekkürler.
I want to say something.
Please.
I met the UN representative Louisa 2 weeks ago to prepare for this, and she was complaining she has no idea about UN climate change issues, and she's complaining she has no idea. I'm really impressed. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, your experience is really deep. Thank you so much for your presence and for sharing your thoughts and really experience on this particular issue. Really, it's not a compliment; it's a truth.
Thank you. Şimdi soru cevap bölümümüze geçtik. Bu soru cevap bölümünde sorulara geçmeden önce aslında beni başta uyarmışlardı. Fakat bir sorudan öte bir aslında bizimle birlikte cevap verecek, konuşacak. Yanılıyor muyum? Arkadaşlar oradan işaret ediyorlar. Evet, bir soru cevap bölümümüz var şu anda. Aslında biz ona devam edelim. Lütfen sorularınıza devam edelim bölüme.
I don't have interpretation.
Sorry, okay. Now Q&A side
Q&A,
start.
yes.
Yeah, already. You can go on with the questions and answers.
Yes,
yeah.
I really don't have any questions, but I think it would be really useful for the audience and participants to listen from Africa, from particular countries who were affected greatly by climate change. I know that I'm really glad that my brother is ambassador of Nigeria here. I mean, I know it's a bit technical, but I'm pretty sure that you can share your thoughts and ideas about the bad experience that parts of Nigeria witnessed, in particular because of climate change and flooding that affected many areas in your country. Yes,
yeah,
we have.
I'm just looking for it.
We will bring your mic in a minute.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellencies and friends, and the Embassy of Egypt for the privilege of organizing these talks to enlighten us, and then of course to give perspectives on the way forward. Now, before I say anything about the impact of climate change in my country, Nigeria, my observation is very simple, that the global community came to the realization of the devastating effect of climate change over 50 years ago. And then, of course, the UN took the lead by coming up with the conventions on mitigations of climate change. Since then, we've had the Kyoto Convention, we've had the Paris Agreement, and several others. And for me, I think a lot has been done, of course, a lot of work has been done, but given the urgency of the situation, that the natural disasters occurring from climate change are things beyond our control. We don't control the outcomes. That we are not giving it the desired attention, the desired urgency. 30 years down the line, we don't have control of what's going to happen. We don't even have control of what's going to happen next year. So it's very important that the global community gives the climate change issue the urgency that it deserves. And then the sincerity that it deserves, so that we are more on action than on rhetorics. So that every time we sit and decisions are taken, there are concrete implementation mechanisms. The UN is doing everything it can, but the UN, from my perspective, as an individual citizen, is becoming weaker and weaker because countries are taking their national interests above the interest of the global community. So it's very, very important we do that. Otherwise, like somebody said earlier, the human species is doomed. We have this effect of climate change all over the world. And in my country, we've had the devastating effects even from what is going on in the Lake Chad. The Lake Chad is drying up. Lake Chad provides sustenance for close to 150 million people. Well, it's drying up, so there's also desertification within the area. There is, it creates displacement, population displacement. It creates confused migration. It creates socio-political instability because of hunger, disease, and famine, and all that. Now you mix that with the current flood, also creates instability, economic problems, and all that. So we feel the impact of global change. And like someone said on the panel earlier, we didn't create the problems. That's why we are optimistic that COP27 is going to happening in Africa, in a country that is close to some of these devastating impacts, that you will use the presidency of COP27 to promote, to advocate for more concrete outcomes, so that as soon as it's over, we move very quickly to the implementation stage. It is not so much the issue of funding for, the promissory notes and all that, for providing funding to tackle, to assist less developed countries in mitigation efforts. Is also to begin to think about innovative ways, for instance, for countries to move at their own pace. There has to be some kind of compromise. For countries to move at their own pace in implementation. Countries that did not cause the problem move slower than countries that are causing the problems. Because the reverse is the case now. The countries that are causing the problems are forcing the less developed countries to move faster in implementation. And then, of course, there's reluctance on that side, so nothing is achieved in the process. I think these are some of the issues we should look at. Let's be more sincere. Issues of conflict and All issues of conflict can be resolved by diplomacy, honest diplomacy, discussions, negotiations, and all that. Or climate change, you can't negotiate. You're not going to negotiate with God because the moment you destroy your environment, and then the impacts just come on you like rain shower. And it affects every country of the world, of course, in different proportions. And then the effect also is felt in different proportions. But at the end of the day, if we do not address the issues very quickly, not at this rate, because we started 50 years ago. 50 years down the line, some people are still talking about 2053, whereas we don't know what's going to happen in 2023. So it's very interesting, the progress that has been made between Turkey and UK in electric and all that. We also need to share knowledge with the less developed countries. Very important to do that. You know, if I want to be selfish, I would say, okay, you know, UK should first come and discuss with us and assist us in some of these mitigation measures before coming to Turkey, because Turkey already has the technology and knowledge and all that. So these are some of the things we would like to see. More interest in assisting developing countries will go a long way in solving some of the problems. Otherwise, we're not going to have cooperation and we will be stuck in a place. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And any questions? Sorusu olan. Buyurun lütfen.
Thank you so much. My name is Hasham Ahmed. I'm political counselor in the Embassy of Pakistan here in Ankara. First, I would like to thank you, Excellency, and the British Embassy and UNDP for really putting up this very pertinent event right before COP27 to discuss these very important topics. Much has already been said about what Pakistan is going through right now. We are one of the topmost 10 most climate change affected countries in various lists. Our foreign minister has characterized the recent floods in Pakistan as the ground zero of climate catastrophe. And as Ms. Louise pointed out, that we are not awaiting climate catastrophe, we are living through it. And the numbers that she has shared of 1/3 of Pakistan being underwater, 33 million people affected, the losses of over $30 billion. These are not just numbers, but this is a huge crisis that we are going through, which is now giving rise to multiple future crises as the water recedes, but the next stage and phases, they begin. So we are undergoing through that phenomena right now. There has been a UN flash flood appeal that we have worked very closely with UNDP, with other agencies as well, earlier of $160 million that was later revised up to $816 million. But let me tell you, let me share here that there is frustration in Pakistan right now, and more linked with the fact that, you know, Pakistan is, as has been highlighted, it is not one of the biggest emitters, but going through this horrific tragedy. So there is this frustration in Pakistan before COP27 that the deal between global north and global south is not working. And so with this in mind, our leadership in the past few months have been raising their voice at every forum. The Prime Minister of Pakistan, also the Vice Chair of COP27, is actively looking forward to his participation in the COP27 to raise these issues. We hope that COP27 would be able to focus on the climate finance agenda. We have heard loss and damage. It's heartening, it's pleasing to note, to hear loss and damage being highlighted here at this event as well. We hope that it will be made formally part of the climate finance agenda at COP27. We are also hoping that that this COP27 will capitalize the adaptation fund and will introduce some sort of agility and speed in it, particularly for those countries who are looking to build resilience. By the time most of these funds are mobilized, the need on the ground is often changed, considering the pace with which these catastrophes are unfolding on ground. And of course, we have been calling for the balance strategies in terms of mitigation, adaptation as well. So we hope that COP27 would be able to focus on all these important issues. We are fully confident that Egypt, as the president of this COP27, will use its good offices to highlight these issues and bridge differences, as Your Excellency have pointed out, between the global north and global south. So wish you all the best for the upcoming COP27, and we hope to play a very active role in this event. Thank you.
Çok teşekkür ediyoruz değerli paylaşımınız için. Başka soru, yorum? Is there any question, or maybe you would like to share your ideas? Please.
I'm Professor Meryem Bekloğlu from Middle East Technical University, and I'm very happy to be here, and thank you all the parties who are leading this. And I want to underline something that sometimes we try to use the climate change as an escape for our wrongdoings, like land use. And when I say land use is like agriculture and urbanization, that in many places in Turkey and many countries around the world, that land use is the biggest problem for the species diversity loss. And also because we destroy the ecosystems for the expense of producing food. Okay, we understand that we need food, but also we build houses in the floodplains and so on, that now the climate change, which expresses itself in the extreme events, then we see the problem. But the underlying main problem is the unprecedented use of our ecosystems, you know, the land use. And I'm not trying to undermine climate change or anything, but if you get the cause-effect relationship better, we can develop better solutions. In here, like climate change has become lately for the governments and all the, you know, high level of organizations as a scapegoat. Yes, it is important, but the land use, wrong agricultural practices, and wrong urbanization is the main cause that we use the resilience and the stability of the ecosystems. I think we have to remember all the time that what we are doing, our economical actions, are creating the system more, more vulnerable to the impact of the climate change, especially now the heat waves or the floodings and so on. I think as a scientist, I thought that I should underline that still our data show that 70–90% of the impact is because of the land use. We destroy the ecosystems and we destroy their resilience. When the extreme event comes, then it becomes a catastrophe. I mean, if you don't have the houses on the floodplain, literally we won't get those all casualties and stuff, you know. We need a better economical system, better management system, and better understanding of how the economy and ecology work together. What is ecological is also economical, from my point of view as an ecologist. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please. Can we get a microphone?
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for hosting this event. Thank you for the speakers for giving all this information. I would like to, let me introduce myself, Mohammed Al-Harbi, Charge the Affairs of Saudi Arabia. I would like to, I'm sure Egypt will be successful in hosting COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, which is very close to very promising project in Saudi Arabia, in Niyet, which is just at the side of the Red Sea. We have their promising project of blue and green
hydrogen. I don't know if you heard about it, and it's very clean energy. It's a part of promising the vision 2030 to reduce consuming a lot of fossil or oil, which has a very big part in climate change. So this is one of the very important projects to divert the energy resources. And the other thing is the Middle East Green Initiative, which is also a very important contribution of solving the problem of climate change. So I would like the speakers here to maybe give a comment how we can work on both sides in these projects and in the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, inshallah. Thank you so much.